Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Ramanaya. Namaskaram. Last time we met, I talked about the final verse of Śrī Aruṇācala Aṣṭakam, and from this meeting onwards, I'm going to be talking about Śrī Aruṇācala Aṣṭakam. As I explained when I started to discuss Arunachala Aṣṭakam, these two songs arose spontaneously in Bhagavan's heart without any external prompting. And at that time I explained about how Bhagavan came to compose Patikam, and how the verses kept on coming to him, and he finally wrote them down. So he wrote the first 9 verses of Patikam on 9 consecutive days, 1 verse a day. And the final 2 verses he wrote on the 10th day. On the 11th day, he started for Giri Pradakshina. And when he was starting, he was accompanied by a devotee called Swami. And as they were leaving Virupaksha cave, where he was living at that time, another devotee called Ayasami gave Swami some paper and a pencil, saying that since Bhagavan had been composing verses every day, he may compose some more at any time. So Swami should have the paper and pencil ready in case he did so. And that day, while walking round the hill, Bhagavan composed 6 more verses, which are the first 6 verses of Arunachala Aṣṭakam. And when a devotee called Narayan Reddy came to Virupaksha cave, either that evening or the next day, and heard about these verses, he wanted to have them printed. Bhagavan then looked at them again, and seeing that the first 11 were composed in a meter called Erosir Viritam. That's it's got 7 feet in each line, whereas the other 6 were composed in Ensir Viritam, which has 8 feet in each line. He named the first 11 verses Śrī Aruṇācala Aṣṭakam, because Patikam means a poem consisting of 10 or usually 11 verses. And then to make the other 6 into an Ashtikam, a song of 8 verses, he composed 2 more verses in the same Ensir Viritam, and named those 8 Śrī Aruṇācala Aṣṭakam. And just as each verse of Arunachala Patikam begins with the first 1 or 2 syllables of the final foot of the previous verse, the first verse of Arunachala Aṣṭakam begins with the first 2 syllables of the final foot of the last verse of Arunachala Patikam, and each subsequent verse begins with the first 1 or 2 syllables of the final foot of the previous verse. So these 2 works, Arunachala Patikam and Arunachala Aṣṭakam, they're very closely connected. They were part of a single flow of poetry that welled up in Bhagavan's heart spontaneously. In later years, when Bhagavan was saying that he hadn't written anything of his own accord, someone said, well, at least Arunachala Patikam and Ashtikam you wrote of your own accord. Bhagavan said, no, just like you people prompt me from outside to write Uludu Napadu Pradeshonia or whatever it is, Arunachala prompted me from within to write this. So Bhagavan denied any doership in this at all. Of course, it's all by divine grace that all these things happen. And Bhagavan is nothing but that divine grace itself. Though they were, they're really an inseparable pair of songs, Patikam and Ashtikam, whereas Patikam is mostly prayerful. Only in the last 2 verses he's giving us direct teachings. in Arunachala Aṣṭakam, the whole song, I think there's just, yes, there's just one verse where Bhagavan in the final line um, expresses a prayer, but all 8 verses, they're in Jnana Sastra. That's a work teaching jnana, though they're expressed in the form of a stotra. So this Arunachala Aṣṭakam is an extremely important work. And as we'll see, the first verse continues the same line of ideas of the last 2 verses of Arunachala Patikam. So coming now to the first verse that I'll be talking about today, first I'll read the verse. What Bhagavan says in this verse is, Arivaru giriyena Vamudaram mamma adisayan idan sail arivari dakum. Arivaru siruvaya dadu mudal aruna chalamiha peridena arivinilanga. Arihilan adun porul adu tiruvana malayena oruvaral arivura petram arivini maruluru taru kinileka varuhuru mamayamam idu achalamakandane. Sorry, I stumble a little reading sometimes if I don't remember the verse exactly because I'm slightly dyslexic, so I stumble a little. I'll first go through the meaning of this, or I'll first read a summary of the meaning of the whole song, then I'll go through sentence by sentence. The meaning of the verse is, it is seated as if a hill bereft of awareness. Its action is preeminent, difficult for anyone to understand. Though from a young age bereft of knowledge, Arunachalam shone brightly in awareness as what is exceedingly great. I did not know its portal, even having got to know from someone that it is Tiruvannamalai. When, enchanting the mind, it pulled close, at the appropriate time of coming close, I saw as this is Achalam. That's the literal meaning of the verse. If we slightly expand it to make the meaning a little bit more clear, that is an explanatory paraphrase, is, it sits calmly as if a hill bereft of awareness or knowledge, but its action is preeminent, extraordinary or wonderful, difficult for anyone to know or understand, appreciate or recognize. Though from my young age, when I was bereft of knowledge of anything else, Arunachalam shone brightly in my awareness or mind as what is exceedingly great, I did not know or understand or recognize its portal. Its portal means its substance, essence, reality, or what it actually is, even after getting to know from someone that it is Tiruvannamalai. When enchanting or possessing my mind, it pulled me close at that appointed time, proper opportune moment of coming close. I saw as this is Achalam. This is Achalam can mean it means motionless. The basic meaning, it means motionless, still, steady. It also means a mountain, so it can be interpreted as either as I saw this as this is motionless, or I saw as this is a mountain. So going through the sentence by sentence, the first sentence is Arivaru giriyena amadaram. That means it sits calmly as if a hill bereft of awareness or knowledge. The next sentence is Amma adisayam idun sayal arivari dakum. Its action is preeminent, difficult for anyone to understand. Then the third sentence is a long one. Arivaru siruvayadu adu mudal aruna chalam miha peridena arivinilanga, arihilan adans porul, adu tiruvanamalai, ena arivoral, oruvaral, arivura petrum. That means though from my young age, when I was bereft of knowledge, implying bereft of knowledge of anything else, Arunachalam shone brightly and clearly in my awareness or my mind. That Arivin can mean either in awareness or in mind, as what is Miha Peridu, exceedingly great. Though it was shone thus, I did not know its porul, even after getting to know from someone that it is Tiruvannamalai. And then the final line is, Arivine marulurtu aruhinileka aruhurum amayam idu achalamakandain. When in chanting the mind, it pulled close. At the opportune moment of coming close, I saw as this is Achalam. As I say, all the verses of Arunachalam, of Arunachala Aṣṭakam, have a very, very deep meaning. So I'll begin to go through the meaning a little more deeply now. As I explained, Bhagavan composed this verse the day after he composed verses 10 and 11 of Arunachala Patikam. And in it, he continues to extol the efficacy and benefit of thinking of Arunachala, as he did in those two verses. He ended verse 10 by advising us, Otumin huekal ulamadilloririv, we koli Arunamagiriye. That means souls be saved by thinking of the great Aruna Hill, this killer of the soul who shines in the heart. Shines in the heart implies he shines in the heart as our own being, I am. And then he began the verse 11 by saying, Giridu parama karudia vembol ketava retane kollo. Like me, who considered or who meditated upon this hill as the supreme, how many are those who have thereby been destroyed? So in this verse, he elaborates upon this experience of his, in verse 11, he very clearly referred to his own experience when he says, Embol, like me, how many are there like me who have been destroyed? So in this verse, he's elaborating upon what he had written in that first line of verse 11. So this verse is autobiographical in the sense that in it, while praising the preeminent and wonderful nature of Arunachala's action, namely the action of its grace, he says that from his young age, when he knew nothing else, Arunachala was shining brightly in his awareness as Miha Peridu, what is exceedingly great. But that even after coming to know from someone that it is Tiruvannamalai, he did not know or fully comprehend its porul. That implies what it actually is, until the sacred moment when, in chanting and possessing his mind, it pulled him close, whereupon he saw it as Achalam, which can be taken to mean either what is eternally and immutably motionless, namely Satya, pure being awareness, I am, or a mountain. So in the first sentence, Arivaru Giriyena Amadarum, it is seated as if a hill bereft of awareness or knowledge. The word ena is a particle of comparison that can mean either as or like. So we could take it as it is seated as a hill bereft of awareness, or we could take it is seated like a hill or as if a hill bereft of awareness. But since the intention with which Bhagavan wrote this verse was to imply that though it seems to be a hill bereft of awareness, it is actually not so. That's what Bhagavan is implying. So in this context, the appropriate meaning for enna is like, or in the sense of as if. We generally consider objects in the world, most objects in the world, to be devoid of awareness. But certain objects, namely living human bodies and the living bodies of other sentient beings, we consider them to be endowed with awareness. However, according to Bhagavan, all objects, all phenomena, whether physical or mental, are jada, meaning they're not actually aware at all, and are therefore as insentient as rocks and other such objects. Living bodies, unlike rocks, seem to be endowed with awareness because in each one there is, or at least seems to be, an ego that identifies it as I and therefore shines through it. That is, since we as ego are aware of ourselves as I am this living body, every other living body seems to us to be an ego just like us. And since ego is endowed with awareness, each living body seems to be endowed with awareness, even though every one of them is actually as jada as a rock or a dead body. In the case of Bhagavan's body, when it was living, there was no ego that identified it as I. So what was seen shining through it was not an ego, but the reality of each one of us, namely the one fundamental and ultimate reality called Brahman, which is the infinite ocean of clarity and love. Just as that infinite ocean of clarity and love shone through the physical form of his body, he saw the same infinite ocean of clarity and love shining through the physical form of Arunachala. So he sang in this verse that though it is seated as a hill, as if a hill bereft of awareness, Amma adisayam idansayal arivaridakam. Its action is adisaya, it's preeminent, extraordinary, or wonderful, difficult for anyone to know or understand. The preeminent and extraordinary and wonderful sail, doing or action of Arunachala that he refers to in this second verse is its aral sail, it's the action of its grace. And since it does this action without actually doing anything, but just by being the infinite love that it actually is, it is difficult for anyone to adequately understand or appreciate it. And most people are not even able to recognize or be aware of it at all. In spite of the infinitely subtle and wonderful action of its grace, for the majority of people, it seems to be just Arivarugiri, a hill bereft of awareness, just like any other hill. Just as for many people, Bhagavan seems to be just a human being, albeit a rather exceptional one, who was born and died like the rest of us. That's how it appears to people, but actually Bhagavan is that supreme reality. So, as I say, the word sail that he uses here, which means it's a verbal noun that means doing. It's often used in the sense of action, but an action is a doing. But though it implies doing, Bhagavan made it clear that grace, the nature of grace is to do without doing. That is, grace does everything without doing anything. In the 15th paragraph of Nana, he talks about the Panchakritya. The Panchakritya are the 5 divine functions. That is the functions of God, that is creation, sustenance, dissolution, veiling, and grace. So these 5, the most important one is grace. But Bhagavan says all these 5 happen isan sanidana visesha matratal, by the mere special nature of the presence of God. Presence means his being. So by his just being as he is, Everything happens as it's meant to happen. In the 13th paragraph of Nana, he says everything is happening by one Parameshwara Shakti, one divine ruling power. But that divine ruling power, as he makes clear in the 15th paragraph, is not doing anything but just being as it is. And by its being as it is, everything happens as it's meant to happen. So all things are happening. That everything that happens is part of that Aral sale, the act of grace of Arunachala. But all its acts of grace, what they ultimately are leading up to is the act of grace that he describes in verse 10 of Arunachala Aṣṭakam. Because this verse 10 is very closely connected to this verse. What he says in verse 10 of Arunachala Aṣṭakam is, I have seen a wonder, this magnetic hill that forcibly seizes the soul. Forcibly seizes means it pulls or attracts the soul. And then he goes on, so he describes Arunachala as a magnetic hill. Then he goes on to describe its action. When first he says it forcibly seizes the soul, but then he goes into how its action of grace works in more detail. What he says in the second sentence is subduing the mischievous, implying that outward going mental activity of the soul who thinks of it once, pulling, dragging, or attracting that soul to be facing towards itself, the one. The one implies the one reality that shines in the heart as Satchit, thereby making it achala, motionless like itself. It will take that sweet soul as Bali. What he means by sweet soul is that spiritually ripened soul. And taking it as Bali means, Bali is the food that is offered in sacrifice. So taking as Bali means he will consume us. So here he describes very beautifully how the action of Arunachala grace is working. That all the external experiences of our life are given to us by grace, but they're all leading towards us ultimately turning within. So if we once think of Arunachala, that will start a process whereby he will slowly subdue the mischievous activity, the cheshte. That means he will reduce the speed or the momentum with which we are going outwards, our enthusiasm for going outwards. He will slowly reduce that, and then he will pull us in to make us tanadu abhimukham, to make us facing towards itself. Towards itself implies Arunachala shining in our heart, so he pulls us in to face towards ourself, which is what Arunachala actually is. And by making us face towards ourselves, he thereby makes us motionless, because attending to anything other than ourself is a mental activity, whereas attending to ourself is a subsidence of all mental activities. Because when we attend to ourself, we as ego subside, and when we subside, our activity subsides along with us. That is how he makes us achala like itself, like himself. So Arunachala makes us achala like himself by pulling our attention within, and then thereby through this process he has ripened us, so we become a sweet soul, and only a sweet soul is a fit soul to be offered, to be taken, accepted as Bali. So he will then take us as Bali, he will consume us. And then he says, then, what is this? That's an expression of wonder. And then he ends, as I said earlier, he ends this verse by saying, souls be saved by thinking of the great Aruna hill, this killer of the soul who shines in the heart. So the sale that he refers to in the second sentence of of Arunachala Aṣṭakam, the first verse of Arunachala Aṣṭakam, is this process that he's describing here, this process of slowly subduing our outward-going mental activity, pulling us within to face itself, making us motionless like itself, and thereby consuming us as Bali. So this is the process that this process of grace is what he describes as here as sail. It's doing, it's action, and as he makes clear, as I referred to earlier in the 15th paragraph of Nana, he does all this without actually doing anything, just by being as he is. This is one of the significances of when he, in this verse 10 of Patikam, when he refers to Arunachala as a magnetic hill. Just like a magnet makes, if you bring iron filings near a magnet, the iron filings will be pulled towards it. So the iron filings will be made to act by the mere presence, by the mere being of the magnet. That is, the magnet doesn't have to do anything to attract iron filings. Just by being as it is, it pulls all those iron filings towards itself. So Arunachala does all this process of grace without actually doing anything, but just by being as he is. Just as it's the nature of a magnet to pull iron filings towards itself, it doesn't have to do anything to do that. It's the nature of grace to slowly reduce our outward-going mental activity, to pull us within to face itself, thereby to make us motionless like itself, and thereby to feed upon us. So this whole process he refers to in just one word in this in the second sentence of this first verse of Ashtikam, sail. Sail, literally it means doing. It's a verbal noun. So his doing, he does without doing anything. He does everything without doing anything. He then begins the third sentence by saying, Ari Baru Siru Vayadu Adu Mudal Adu Mudal, that is from a very earliest childhood when he didn't know anything else, Arunachalam Miha Peridu Ena Arivinilanga. Arunachala shone within, he doesn't even say my awareness or my mind, but it implies that, shone within awareness as what is exceedingly great. So that when he says Arivaru Siruvaidu Adu Mudal, from a young age bereft of knowledge, that implies from his earliest childhood when he knew nothing else. At that time, even from that time, Arunachala was shining in his mind or awareness as what is exceedingly great. What he implies by that is he was aware of Arunachala and recognized that it is what is greater than all other things, even though he was not then aware of it as it actually is. And then in the second half of this third sentence, he says, Arihilan Adum Porul, I did not know its Porul, Adu Tiruvannamalai Ena, Oruvaral Arivurapetram. Even after coming to know from someone that it is Tiruvannamalai, even then I didn't know its Porul. Its Porul means, in this context, means its substance, its reality, what it actually is. Here he refers to an incident that happened in November 1895, less than 10 months before he came to Tiruvannamalai. One day, meeting an elderly relative, he asked him where he had come from, and when the relative replied from Arunachalam, he was surprised to learn that Arunachala is a place that can be visited. So he asked with wonder, from Arunachalam, where is that? To which the relative replied that it is Tiruvannamalai. Even when he came to know this fact about Arunachala, he says, he did not know its porol, its substance, essence, reality, or what it actually is. How he came to know what it actually is what is explained by him in the final line of this verse. Ari vine maruluritu aruhinileka aruhurum amayam idu achala makandain. That literally means when enchanting the mind, it pulled close. At the opportune moment of coming close, I saw as this is Achalam. If we read this sentence superficially, it may seem to be referring to the time when Arunachalam drew him physically to itself, namely on the 1st of September 1896. But when we consider it more carefully, a deeper implication reveals itself, namely that Aruhurum Amayam, the opportune moment of coming close, is actually referring to a time about 6 weeks earlier in Madurai, when Arunachala created an intense fear of death in his heart and thereby pulled his mind inwards to feed upon it, in the exact manner that he described in the second sentence of verse 10 of Śrī Aruṇācala Aṣṭakam, which I explained earlier, subduing the mischievous activity of the soul who thinks of it once, pulling it to be facing towards itself, the one, meaning the one reality, thereby making it Achalam like itself. It will take and consume that sweet soul as Bali. That is, in the clause Arivine Maruluritu Aruhinilieka, when enchanting my mind, it pulled close. Arivine is an accusative or second case form of Arivu, which means awareness, or in this case, mind or attention. So it is explicitly the object of Marulurutu, enchanting or possessing, but also implicitly the object of Aruhinileka, when it pulled close. And hence, rather than just implying when it enchanted my mind and pulled my body close, what this verb more deeply implies is when it enchanted and pulled my mind close. So the word arivine, mind, is the object not only of enchanting but also pulling. So when it enchanted and pulled my mind close. So this corresponds to the clause Oru Tanadu Abhimukamaha Etu in verse 10 of Patikam, pulling the soul to be facing towards itself for one. So it's the same pulling that he's referring to here. In other words, since Arunachala exists and shines eternally in the heart as I, pulling the mind close implies Arunachala pulling it within to face towards itself and thus to be intimately close to itself, thereby making it motionless like itself and consuming it as Bali. Therefore, when he ended this first verse of Ashtikam with the words, Idu Achala Makandain, I saw as this is Achalam, he did not mean merely that he saw Arunachala as a mountain, an external object, something other than himself, but he saw it as pure being, which is immutable and therefore eternally motionless, Achalam. And he saw it thus by himself being that same motionless reality. That is, we can know Arunachala as it is only by being as it is. Because by pulling his mind inwards and thereby making it motionless like itself, then only he truly experienced the motion, the Achala nature of Arunachalam, the motionless nature of Arunachalam. So he saw it as his own eternally motionless being. It is this supreme act of grace that he referred to in verse 21 of Uludunapadu when he sang, Unadal Khan, becoming food is seeing. That is, as he explained in verse 20 of Uludunapadu, seeing God in any other way in any way other than by being completely consumed by him is just seeing manomayamam karchi, a mental vision or mind-constituted image. So, tanne kanam avan kadavul, tanne kanam avan tan kadavul kandan am. That means only one who sees himself is one who has seen God. This is what Bhagavan says in verse 20 of Ulladu. Because it is only by seeing ourselves as we actually are, but we as ego will subside and dissolve in him, thereby becoming one with him and thus knowing him as he knows himself. As he makes clear in verse 8 of Ulladu. Amme poralin unmeil tan unmeine ondu odungi ondru delay unmeil kanal. That is in verse 8, he defines what he means by he defines what true seeing is. The meaning of that sentence is by investigating or knowing the reality of oneself and thereby subsiding or dissolving in the reality of that one real substance, namely God or Brahman, becoming one with it alone is seeing it in reality. So we cannot know God or Arunachala or Brahman as it is, as an object. We can know it only by being it. As Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Upadeshundiya, Tana iritle, Tanna yaritlam. Being oneself alone is knowing oneself. So since Arunachala is ourself, we can know Arunachala only by being Arunachala. And we can be Arunachala only by subsiding back into the heart. These verses of Ulladu therefore lend further to support the view that the scene that Bhagavan referred to when he sang Idu Achalam Akandain, I saw as this is Achalam, was not just seeing Arunachala as the form of a mountain, but was the unmeil kanal, the true seeing it in reality that he referred to in verse 8, by seeing it as the reality of himself, namely pure being, which is eternally motionless. When we interpret this final line in this sense, it complements what he said in the previous two lines, where he said that though it was shining in his mind as exceedingly great, he didn't know its portal, even after coming to know that it is Arunachalam. That is, though since his earliest childhood, when he knew nothing else, he clearly knew that the name Arunachalam referred to Mihaperidu, what is exceedingly great. But when he came to know that but even when he came to know that it is Tirunmalai, he still did not know its portal, its reality, what it actually is. But when it enchanted and pulled his mind close, implying deep within the heart, he finally came to know its portal, which is what is Achalam, motionless or unmoving, namely infinite and eternally motionless pure being. Whereas in the previous sentence, he referred to Arunachalam as Adu, which means that, in this sentence, he refers to it as Idu, which means this, saying, Idu Achalam Akandain, I saw as this is Achalam, because what had previously seemed to be other than himself was finally, by its act of grace, Arosale, revealed to him to be nothing other than his own being, which is infinite and eternally motionless. Another subtle but important point to note here is that though Idu Achalam Akandain can be interpreted to mean I saw this as Achalam, it more precisely means I saw as this is Achalam. That is, Idu is the nominative first case form of this proximal demonstrative pronoun. So if it is interpreted literally, it's not the object of the verb kandain, I saw, though in poetry the nominative first case form of a noun or pronoun can be used in an accusative sense, so it is only if we take it in this non-literal sense that idu achalam akandein would mean this is, I saw this as achalam. In this sense, idu, this, becomes the object of the verb, and achalama is an adverb meaning as achalam. However, if we take idu in its literal nominative sense, then there is no explicit object in this clause, and instead idu achalama is an adverbial clause meaning as this is achalam, which conveys more precisely the subtle truth that Bhagavan intended to express. In this literal interpretation, the adverbial suffix "ar" applies not just to achalam, but to the subclause idu achalam, this is achalam. So the entire clause idu achalam akandein, I saw as this is achalam, it means I saw as this is achalam. That this is not exactly the same as saying I saw that this is Achalam, because that would imply recognizing a fact about Arunachala, namely that it is Achalam. So rather than saying that he's saying what he saw, whether this as Achalam or that this is Achalam, he describes the manner or nature of his saying as this is achalam. That is, when ego is eradicated, what remains is neither any seer nor any object to be seen, but only the one motionless substance, achala vastu, achala porul, namely being awareness, satchit, which is pure subjectless and objectless seeing. Interpreting this this final line of the first verse in this deeper sense also fits better with the meaning of the first line of the second verse, in which he says, Kandavan evan ena karutinul nada, Kandavan indrida nindradu kandain. When investigating within the mind who he who saw is, I saw what remained when he who saw was thereby found to be completely non-existent. If we were to interpret the final line of the first verse to be referring to a time when Arunachala drew Bhagavan physically to itself, then this first sentence of the second verse would seem to imply that it was only after it was only on the 1st of September 1896 when he first came close to the outward form of Arunachala, or the previous evening when from afar, namely from Arayanalur temple, on exactly the same spot from which Tirunjana Sambandha first saw Arunachala, he first saw it standing as a mountain. It would imply that it was only then that he investigated who the seer, namely ego, is, and saw what remained when it thereby ceased to exist. Swami Nathanananda told me that this was what many devotees believed when he first came to Bhagavan in 1918. And it was only several years later that Bhagavan made clear that the self-investigation, Atma-vichara, and consequent annihilation of the ego had occurred about 6 weeks before he left Madurai to come to Tiruvannamalai, namely on the now well-known occasion that intense fear of death arose in him. The last line of verse 1 and first line of verse 2 do not necessarily mean that he investigated the seer and saw what remained when it had thereby been found to be completely non-existent, only after he saw Arunachala as Achalam, but they do seem to suggest a close connection between these two. If we take idu achalam kandain, I saw as this is achalam, or I saw this as achalam, to mean that he saw it as what is eternally and immutably motionless by himself being that, then it means essentially the same as Kandavan indrida nindradu kandain in the second verse, where he says, I saw what remained when he who saw was found to be completely non-existent. if we accept this interpretation, it becomes clear that in the first line of verse 2, he is clarifying the means by which Arunachala made him see itself as Achalam, namely by pulling his mind inwards to investigate who the seer is, and thereby making him remain as Kandavan Indrada Nindradu, but what remained when he who saw was completely non-existent, which alone is what is eternally motionless. So there's close connection between one verse and the next. So if we take this verse, if we understand this verse in the deeper sense, that Idu Achala Makande means I saw as this is motionless, that fits much better with the first line of the next verse. So, I gave quite a detailed explanation of that verse, but there's so much very deep meaning in this verse and in every verse of Ashtikam. So does anyone have any questions about this? I hope that all that I said was clear.
Rati, yeah, you can go ahead. You're already there in the chat box. So
thank you, Shalini. Okay, so I was going to say, first of all, that this beautiful verse with ending in Mamma and what a wonder, and then chanting, and again beginning with Mamma and ending with Amma. It's almost like Amma and Mamma is like, it's Amma's mother, and at the same time Arunachalam is our mother, etc. But by the autobiographical nature of this verse, the fact that Bhagavan heard of Arunachalam when he was, I forget exactly what age, but it happened to me as well, actually. I heard of Arunachalam at age 13 or so, and then thought, what's that strange enchanting name? And I never knew this connected at all to Tirunamalai. Didn't know that. But anyway, getting back to, has this happened to everybody? I mean, Michael, when you heard the name Arunachalam, did it actually enchant you right away in some strange, mysterious, magical way?
I can't say, but Bhagavan has his own way of pulling each of us. So for me, when I first heard about Bhagavan, I was in Sri Lanka at the time. Someone asked me whether I had heard of Ramana Maharshi. I said no, and then they showed me Arthur Osborne's book, Ramana Maharshi and the Path of Self-Knowledge, which is Osborne's biography of Bhagavan, and they showed me the passage about his death experience. So I read about that. That kindled my curiosity, but I didn't know much about Bhagavan. Then I heard more from one or two other people, a little bit. I met someone who had read Paul Brunton's books, and so I heard a little, but I didn't really know much about Bhagavan before I came to Tiruvannamalai. For me, what the great attraction was when I read Nana, well, an English translation, probably not a very good English translation. I think it was probably the question and answer version that had been translated by T.M.P. Mahadevan. But when I read that, that's what really attracted me. As soon as I read that, I understood, yes, this is what I've been looking for. How can we know anything correctly without knowing correctly the knower? If we don't even know who am I, who is the knower, how can we be sure of anything known by us? So as soon as I read Nana, I was attracted. Then, of course, I heard, when I came to Tirumalai, I heard about going round the hill. I didn't know anything about the significance of Arunachala, but I thought it was nice to go round the hill. And I started to go round, and slowly the attraction grew on me. So it's different for each person, it's different. But yes, Bhagavan has his own way. As he said, this is a magnetic hill. So it has its own way of pulling each one of us to it.
Yes. For me too, actually, when I read Nanyar at what age was that? Was much later in 2015 or sometime then, when I actually read the essay with great deal of care. Then I said, oh my God, I'm sold now. I'm totally sold. I don't need anything else in my life. I've really found it. I found the one gem I was looking for, That's the one. This is the one gem I found. So that was it. So, but getting back to this verse, Achalam, the enchanting wonder of Achalam is actually, the beauty of this verse is that how it's like the lover of a Shiva attracting pulling you in, attracting this image of you, the person, the other person, into himself, the Achalam into the Achalam, So it's actually very beautiful. It's a beautiful image, right?
That is, well, as a jiva, as an ego, we are constantly chalana, we are constantly moving, but by pulling us to itself, like a magnet pulling an iron piece to itself, he thereby makes us motionless like himself.
Yes, that's right. You feel absolutely that, one is drawn within to to one's own being. And one sort of realizes as one goes along that a lot of all the chanchala, or all the so-called outward appearance of activity is not there, because actually underneath it all is that stillness, and that stillness has always been there. And when one keeps going back and holding on to that stillness, how wonderful it is, how absolutely amazing it is.
Yes,
and that is the amazing part of everything. And yes, definitely. So I won't take up more of your time.
right.
Thank you. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala.
There's another question, which is on Arunachala Aṣṭakam. It is Arunachala Aṣṭakam in Sanskrit has a completely different meaning as compared to the one in Tamil. The Sanskrit one begins with Darshana Prasadasi, etc. However, in Tamil, it talks about Sri Bhagavan's pull towards the holy hill in the first stanza and so on. Are the two poems' prayers different?
I didn't know there was an Arunachala Aṣṭakam in Sanskrit. I'd never heard of the word. I know the sloka, Darshana Daprasadasi Janana Kamalaye Kasyantu Marana Mukti Smarana Tarunachalam. But I thought that was from one of the Puranas. I didn't know that was part of a song called Arunachala Aṣṭakam. I've never heard of the Sanskrit Arunachala Aṣṭakam, so I couldn't say anything about that. But this Tamil one. This is a very. It's not like any other work. It's a very, very unique work, and it poured out of Bhagavan's heart. Well, as a sort of after the Patikam poured out, this also poured out. Whereas Patikam is more prayer and more emphasis on the bhakti. This is more emphasis on the this is an Upadesha work. Though it's in the form of a stotra, it's an Upadesha work. Someone asked, what does erusir viritam mean? That it means erusir viritum. Sir means a metrical foot. So erusir means it's got, each line has 7 feet. That's in Arunachala Patikam. In Arunachala Aṣṭakam, it's ensir viritum. It's got 8 feet for each line. That was I was just answering that in answer to a message I saw popping up.
The next question is, when we diminish ego, do we also diminish any creative skills as well? Thank you.
When we diminish ego, we diminish everything. That the more ego subsides, of course, all these external things do not disappear entirely until ego disappears entirely. But the more we as ego subsides, the more our interest in going outward subsides. Creative skills, well, we've got the example of three very great poets, Bhagavan, Murugan, and Sadhu Om. So if we consider their poetic flow as a creative skill, obviously it didn't subside after or at least in our view, it didn't subside from our perspective, because from Bhagavan's perspective, I mean, once ego is annihilated, what remains is only, as Bhagavan says in verse 28 of Upadesha Undiyā, when we know what the real nature of ourself is, then Anadi, Ananta, Akhanda, Satchidananda. That implies all that exists is Anadi, Ananta, Akhanda, Satchidananda, which is what we actually are. Anadi means beginningless. Ananta means endless, limitless, boundless, infinite. And Akhanda means unbroken, undivided. So one infinite, undivided whole. That is all that remains. So Bhagavan's composing of Arunachala Patikam and Ashtikam and Naksharamlai and Uludunapadu and Upadesha Undiyā, this is all only in our view, not in his view. In his view, all that is there is Anadi, Ananta, Akhanda, Satchidananda.
The next question. If I keep failing in my effort, getting distracted, pulled by desires, or discouraged, am I still responsible, or is even failure somehow part of the purifying process?
Well, whatever we go through is part of a purifying process. When we talk about failure, is that asking about failure in external endeavors or this endeavor to go within? If it's about external endeavors, whatever we try to achieve externally is futile, because we will only experience what we're destined to experience. So there's trying to make effort externally is futile, because we're not going to change anything. What is destined to happen, that alone is going to happen. If we're talking about failure to go within, that's all part of a process. That is, even in worldly undertakings, they say the path to success is the road to success is paved with failure. So anyone who's achieved anything great in this world, they've achieved it only after failing many times. So it's the same in the spiritual path. Of course, we fail so many times. We know we should be keeping our attention fixed within and not allowing it to come outwards, but we keep on allowing it to come outwards. So we're all failing constantly. But what's important is not succeeding. What's important is trying. So long as we're trying our best to turn within, we will certainly succeed, because Bhagavan's grace will support us. So we shouldn't be dejected by failure, because eventually we will succeed. But we will succeed only after trying and failing many times. If we don't fail, it means we're not trying. So we shouldn't be discouraged by failure. We should just go on trying, because if we are trying sincerely to turn within, we will certainly succeed sooner or later. When Bhagavan was asked about what is the sign of progress, he said the only sign of progress is perseverance. So what's important is that we keep on trying. Let's not worry about our success or failure. That's in Bhagavan's hands. Our responsibility, the small, Bhagavan's grace will do everything for us. The only small responsibility he's given us is trying to turn within. So long as we're trying to turn within, we can be confident he will do everything else for us. If we're not trying to turn within, it means we don't really want it. So he's not going to give us what we don't want. So we have to at least try. Everything else he will do.
Michael, the next question. Oh, yes. Somebody has asked that, could you please give us the YouTube title when you put this session on YouTube? I would love to be able to review this discussion.
It will be today's date. Ramana Maharshi Foundation. Today's date in the format 2025 -09 -13. And then Ramana Maharshi Foundation UK, Śrī Aruṇācala Aṣṭakam, verse 1. That will be the title. And what I talked about today, most of that is from an almost complete explanation that I've written about this verse 1 of Arunachala Ashtikam, which, all being well, I should hopefully post on my blog within a week or so. And I'll likewise be doing for all 8 of these verses. There'll be a series of 8 articles, Bhagavan willing, on Arunachala Aṣṭakam, because it's such a deep work. There's so much contained in it.
The next question. Since Bhagavan sees us, that is jivas, as jara, insentient, could it be then understood that when one of us becomes self-realized, we are simply recognizing ourselves as who we are and have always been, that is the self? The jiva appearance is simply an illusion, delusion. There is no need.
Who said that Bhagavan sees us as jada? He doesn't see us as jada. What Bhagavan says is all phenomena, all objects are jada. But we as jiva, we are not an object. We have a subject. We identify ourselves as an object. This body is an object. The mind is an object. The mind, in the sense, all the other thoughts are objects. But the jiva is jiva or ego, they're the same. That I that identifies all these things as these. So jiva or ego is not jada. It is chit jada granti. It is that not formed by the entanglement of chit and jada. So the essential nature of jiva is chit. That is why it is said, jiva brahmaikya, the oneness of jiva and Brahman. And why in that famous saying of Shankara, Brahma satyam jagat mitye jivo brahmeva napara. That means Brahman alone, Brahman is real, the world is unreal. Jiva is nothing other than Brahman alone. So what we actually are is Brahman. So Bhagavan doesn't see us as jada. He sees us as pure awareness. It's we who mistake ourselves to be this jada body. Sorry, I corrected the error in the first part of the question. What was the question?
The question was, since Bhagavan sees us, that is jivas, as jara and sentient, could it be then understood that when one of us becomes self-realized, we are simply recognizing ourselves as who we are and have always been, the self? The jiva appearance is simply an illusion or delusion.
When we become self-realized, who is going to realize it? What is called self-realization is nothing but the annihilation of ego, annihilation of jiva. What remains when ego is annihilated is the underlying reality of ego, which is pure awareness. So what realizes, like Bhagavan says in the second verse of Arunachala Aṣṭakam, which I'll be talking about next time, which I briefly talked about today, he says, Kandava nevanena karutinal nadak. When investigating who is the seer, Kandanan indrida nindradu kandain. I saw what remained when the seer became non-existent. When he says, I saw what remained when the seer became non-existent, what remains alone can see what remains. Because when the seer becomes non-existent, the seer isn't seer means the ego. The ego is not there to see what remains. So what realizes Brahman is Brahman alone. What knows God is God alone. So if we want to know God, we have to be God. That's why Bhagavan often said, being alone is seeing. So as a jiva or ego, we will never know what we actually are. When we know what we actually are, we will cease to be ego and be what we actually are.
The next question, how to reconcile jara as per being the nature of name and form? Yeah, this is a question I've asked Michael when he was expanding on the first verse. In any case, the main question is how to reconcile jara as being the nature of name and form.
That is, names and forms are objects, things that we are aware of. Whatever is an object of awareness is not aware. It's merely an image, an impression that appears in awareness. But the awareness in which it appears is not the pure awareness, but only that awareness that is called ego or mind. So all physical phenomena are jada, they're devoid of awareness. Not only physical phenomena, all mental phenomena, all thoughts, feelings, likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, perceptions, memories, these are all jada. They are images, but we are aware of. They're impressions, mental impressions. So awareness is, it's only ego that is aware of all these. It's only as ego, but we're aware of all these things. So all the objects that ego is aware of are jada. Ego, which identifies itself with a set of objects, namely this body and mind, is what is called chit jada granti. The essential nature of ego is chit, the pure awareness. But because that's mixed and conflated with adjuncts, which are all jada, it seems to be something other than pure awareness. Impure awareness, we can call it, but it is not the pure awareness that we actually are. So long as we're knowing anything other than ourselves, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are, because what we actually are is pure awareness. That means awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself.
The next question, Bhagavan teaches everything, literally, that everything is only thought or ego, rising with ultimate truth as ajata. Therefore, everything with form has no inherent value. But, on the other hand, we hear of certain days like full moons being considered auspicious. We know everything on earth is just thought with no intrinsic value, but Arunachala is sacred. Bodies get cremated, but a Jnani's body is buried in a very specific way, suggesting there is in fact intrinsic value or meaning in the physical body. I can persevere on the challenging path of turning within, and persevere in letting go of everything because ajata is truth. But if we're told that some days are special, but others aren't, some bodies are special, but others aren't, some ceremonies or mountains are special, but others aren't, some locations are sacred, but others aren't, it starts sounding like the ego is running the show.
All these are a matter of perspective. There's a nice story about Hanuman. Some person approached Hanuman, who was in the jungle meditating on Rama. And some person approached and asked him what is an auspicious. He wanted to start some business or marry his daughter, get his daughter married or something. He wanted to know an auspicious time. So he came to Rama and asked, what would be an auspicious time for me to commence this undertaking? And Hanuman replied, Rama Titi, Rama Nakshatra, Rama day of the week, Rama month, Rama year. For him, all is Rama, so all times are equally auspicious. So it's all a matter of perspective. All these things about auspicious days, inauspicious days, these are mostly from a worldly point of view. However, there's a certain relative truth in it. For example, it is said that during many people, worldly people, consider eclipses to be an inauspicious time. So they have certain observances. Actually, those are, from a spiritual point of view, they're considered auspicious times. Why they're considered auspicious? Because at times of grahana, an eclipse, whether a solar eclipse or lunar eclipse, it has an effect on the mind. It is more difficult to focus the mind and to keep the mind steady during a time of an eclipse. So if any spiritual practice that is done at that time is more efficacious than done at other times. Because if you're, for example, if you're training for the Olympics, if you're running on a smooth, hard surface, it's relatively easy. But if you start trying to run on a sand dune, for example, the sand is constantly moving. Because it's more challenging, it strengthens the muscles more. So just like that, in the spiritual path, what is done during a grahana, I'm just saying a grahana means an eclipse, what is done during an eclipse is considered more efficacious. So what worldly people consider as inauspicious time, often spiritual people consider as auspicious. So these are all relative and all dependent on the point of view. Ultimately, everything is sacred because everything is only Brahman. There's nothing other than Brahman. So it all depends on different perspective. But from a relative point of view, there are times that are considered holy, because generally we all tend to get caught up in worldly activities. Why do we have holy days, auspicious times? It's at least some time we should set aside for doing these, for focusing our mind on God or whatever it is. So all these, at a certain level, from a certain perspective, all these things have a certain value. But none of these are, ajata is the ultimate truth. But we are not experiencing ajata now. We experience all this. So long as we experience all this, we things have a relative truth. Nothing has absolute truth. The only thing that has absolute truth is I am, which is eternal and unchanging.
I think
regarding the value of the significance of the name and form of Arunachala, for example, Bhagavan takes this subject is dealt with very thoroughly by Bhagavan in later verses of Arunachala Aṣṭakam. So we'll be covering these in subsequent meetings. We've got 7 more verses to cover, and I think that takes us up to the end of December. So there's a lot of very deep meaning in these verses of Arunachala Aṣṭakam. So hopefully we'll be able to go through all these in subsequent meetings.
in Advaita Vedanta and in some other non-dual philosophies such as Buddhism and so on, there is the very clear distinction of conventional or sort of everyday truth, sort of vyavahara satya, truth and reality, and the ultimate, one could call it the absolute, which is the paramartha satya or satya. And I think that I think sort of where we often flounder is really yeah, I guess I'm sorry, and the conventional also is a truth, and there's a lot of discussion about what the nature of that truth is, that reality is, because ultimately, of course, it is the ultimate, but it has a certain everyday transactional conventional reality which has to be navigated, and we cannot reach that absolute or ultimate truth without sort of going through this conventional reality and so on. So, I mean, this is the sort of, it's not exactly a paradox, but this is the sort of connection, as I understand, that we really do need to engage with, certain virtues, certain auspiciousness and so on, to still our mind, to do various practices. And that leads us to recognize everything as simply ultimate. But as long as the body is there, the everyday still has to be navigated and so on. Yeah, I don't know. It's just
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're constantly discriminating. We what food do we eat? We discriminate and decide certain things are food, so we eat them. Certain things we don't consider food, so we don't eat them. We don't go around eating mud. We don't drink dirty water. We try to drink pure water, and so on and so forth. So in the world of uh, of manifestation of all this multiplicity, there are all these things that have a relative meaning. They're true as relative to this world in which we find ourselves. So just like there are things we distinguish one material thing from another material thing and decide what is food, what is edible, what is drinkable, what is not drinkable, and so on and so forth. Likewise, with in spiritual matters, some things are considered. Ultimately, everything is sacred. We should have respect for everything, but some things are considered more sacred than others. This is just the way we don't treat a living human body or a living body of any creature in the same way that we would treat a rock or a some insentient object. So, because a living body seems to have a sentient being within it, we treat it with differently to how we would treat other things.
On the next question, does Manonasa, I'm sorry, can Manonasa only be experienced after realization of the true self or Turiya, the transcendental consciousness?
They're one and the same thing. Manonasa, that Manonasa means annihilation of mind. That is, the mind is annihilated only when ego is eradicated. The eradication of ego and knowing ourselves as we actually are one and the same thing. That is, we can eradicate ego only by knowing ourselves as we actually are. And we can know ourselves as we actually are only by eradicating ego. So they're one and the same thing. We can't separate them. We can't even say one is the cause of the other because they're the same thing. That is, as soon as we're aware of ourselves as we actually are, we thereby cease to be this ego. Ego is thereby annihilated. So Mananasa is a synonym for knowing ourselves as we actually are.
The next question, Michael. How can we be Arunachalam? Could you please guide me with being Arunachala and what qualities this means?
Bhagavan has explained this very clearly in verse 27 of Uludunapadu. He says, Nanudiyada ulanile, namaduvai ulanile. That means the state in which we exist without rising as I is the state in which we are as that. So to be Arunachala means not to rise as ego. We are already Arunachala. Arunachala is what we actually are. We seem to be something other than Arunachala only because we've risen as ego. So we have to put an end to the rising of ego. We have to cease rising as ego. And then in the second verse of verse 27 of Uludunapadu, Bhagavan says, in the first sentence I say, he says, Nanudiyad ulanile, namaduvai ulanile. The state in which I is without rising is the state in which we are as that. And then in the next sentence he says, Nan udikum tanum ade nadamal, nanudiya tanirape savadu evan. That's a rhetorical question. Without investigating the place where I rises, how to reach the annihilation of oneself in which I does not rise? So when he says without investigating the place where I rises, the place where I rises, the rising I is ego. The place from which ego rises is our being. So investigating what we actually are, investigating our being, is what he describes here as investigating the place where I rises. Without investigating and knowing what we actually are, how can we reach the annihilation of ourself in which I does not rise? And then he goes on to say, Saramal, that means without reaching, implying without reaching the annihilation of oneself, tan aduam, tan nileil, nipadu evan. How to stand in one's own state in which oneself is that. So how to be as we actually are without reaching the annihilation of ourself. The annihilation of ourself means the annihilation of ego. And how to reach the annihilation of ego except by investigating ourself. So your question has been fully answered by Bhagavan in that verse.
Yeah. The next question, Michael. Yes, now this is written in Tamil, but there is a, what does Eru, I can't see the whole thing. What does Eru Chit, something Viruttam mean? Before verse 1 in Arunachala Padagam. Thank you.
Ensi Viritam. It means an eight seer Viritam. A seer, as I said, it's a metrical foot. Viritam is a Tamil form of the Sanskrit word vritta. It's a particular style of verse in Tamil, a viritam. So it's a viritam with 8 metrical feet per line. It's conventional in Tamil poetry to put the name of the poetic meter before well, in the case of Arunachala Aṣṭakam, all 8 verses are the same meter. So just at the beginning you put the name of the meter, Ensi Viritam. In the case of Uludunapadu, for example, Bhagavan puts at the beginning, he puts Vemba. It's because all 40 verses are Vemba. In the case of Uludunapadu there are many different meters. So whenever, if there are 2 or 3 Vembas in a row, he just puts Vemba once before the first one. When the meter changes again, some other meter starts, then he puts the name of the meter. If the meter changes again, he puts the name of the meter. It's just a convention in Tamil poetry, because if you know the meter, if you're familiar with Tamil and you know the meter, you have a better idea how to recite it or whatever. Just like in classical music, before songs they write what is the raga and tala.
I'm not sure if this is a question, but it refers back to the previous question. And it says simply, I asked the question on Manunasa to distinguish it from Manolaya.
Yes, yes. Manolaya is a temporary dissolution of mind, such as sleep. Manonasa is permanent dissolution. That permanent dissolution is brought about by knowing ourselves as we actually are. As soon as we are aware of ourselves as we actually are, we thereby cease to be this mind or ego, and that is the annihilation. That is manonasa, the annihilation of mind. Because the mind or ego is just a false awareness of ourself. When we're aware of ourselves as we actually are, the false awareness is destroyed.
The next question. When the ego rises, the whole world rises along with it, suggesting the illusory or false nature of this world. How can that one single reality in the form of Sri Bhagavan or Arunachalam then make its appearance in this illusory world of our own creation?
By grace. That is grace. That is, though this is all our own creation, when we take the example of dream, a dream is entirely our own mental fabrication. But when we're dreaming, we experience ourselves as a person in the dream. So while dreaming, we don't experience ourselves as the creator of the dream. We experience ourselves as one of the many creatures in the dream. So because we don't experience ourselves as the creator, we don't have control over what we are creating. So that what we are given to experience is determined, as Bhagavan says, determined by prarabdha. Prarabdha is determined by God's grace. So that same grace that is shaping our prarabdha, giving us certain experiences, that same grace is what appears in our dream. As Bhagavan said, you often use the analogy of a lion in the elephant's dream. The lion is unreal, but when it appears in the elephant's dream, it causes the elephant, the shock of seeing a lion causes the elephant to wake up. Likewise, the name and form of a guru are unreal, but they bring about the real awakening. Because though the name and form of Bhagavan is not real, what is shining through that name and form, that is the reality. That is what we actually are. So that is what brings about the awakening.
The next question. In many depictions of famous saints and deities, whether it be Kabir, Buddha, Guru Nanak, Shiva, etc., we often see that their eyes are half open and half closed. What does this signify? Did Bhagavan ever talk about the eyes being the windows to truth? Secondly, as we take ourselves to be a body of which we use our eyes as an instrument to see external objects and to communicate with others as ego, what exactly are we looking at when looking through the eyes of another? Is it an object?
The eyes don't actually see anything. The eyes are just like a camera. A camera doesn't see anything. Eyes receive, or they seem to receive, light from the external world, and that creates an impression in the retina, which gets passed to the brain, and all this neurophysiology and everything. But even the neurophysiologists cannot say how all that gives rise to a visual impression. So what is seeing is not actually the eyes. What is seeing through the eyes is the mind. So in the last verse of Arunachala, sorry, of Atma-vichara, Bhagavan describes Arunachala as manakannakum kannai. That is he describes the senses beginning with eyes. He says Vinadia vilakum kannadi porikum kannam manakannaku kannai. He describes Arunachala as the eye to the mind eye, which is the eye to the 5 senses beginning with I. Beginning with the eyes. What is actually seeing through the eyes is the mind. So the mind, he described the mind as the eye to the 5 senses. But what gives the mind the light to know all these things, that is the real eye. That is what he describes as manakanakum kannai, the eye that is the eye even to the mind eye, which is the eye to all these things. So that doesn't mean that pure awareness, that Arunachala, which is pure awareness, is seeing through the mind, but that it gives light to the mind, enabling the mind to see all other things. This is what he refers to in Aksharamlai. I think verse 15, if I remember correctly. Kannaku kannai kanindri kanune kanu vadevapa Arunachala. Being the eye to the eye, who can see you, who sees without eyes? That is when he says Arunachala sees without eyes, it sees without eyes because it itself is the original eye. So it doesn't need any eye other than itself to know itself. So it sees everything as it is by just being what everything actually is. So he sees without eyes, but he's the eye to the eye. So who can see kannaku kannai, being the eye to the eye, kanindri kanune, you who see without eyes, kan vadu ever, who can see you, who being the eye to the eye sees without eyes. And then he ends with a prayer, pa, that means see, that we can't see Arunachala unless he sees us. That sees us means by his look of grace, by a glance of his grace, he needs to turn our mind within to enable us to see him as he actually is.
This is a question which refers back to the previous question. What is it about creating some bodies but burying others with ceremony that gives more meaning to some particular body?
The body of the Jnani, such as the body of Bhagavan, is considered as a temple of God. Because whereas in our body, who's residing in this body? There's an ego residing. So this body is fit to be burnt. But for the body of a Jnani, because there's no ego residing in that body, what is shining through that body is God himself, or herself, or itself, whatever you want to say. So when we see Bhagavan's eyes, for example, we're not seeing any. There's no ego there looking through that eyes. What is looking through that eyes is our own reality, Atma-vichara, Brahman. So that his body is considered as sacred. So the South Indian Shaivite tradition is to bury the bodies of Jnanis. And the instructions for that are laid down in a very important Tamil text called Tirumantram, which was composed by a great saint called Tirumula. And Bhagavan himself, for example, when Mastan passed away, Bhagavan, though Mastan was born as a Muslim, Bhagavan instructed that he should be given the burial of a Tamil Shaiva saint, and that was a Jnani. So Bhagavan gave, wrote out that because Tirumula wrote the instructions in verses, which not everyone can understand. Bhagavan wrote it out in prose, explaining how they should bury Mastan's body. So when Bhagavan himself did so, that shows there is some significance to these things.
Yeah, the question is, Bhagavan recommended a vegetarian sattvic diet, but is not our diet already predestined?
We don't know what is predestined, do we? until it happens, we don't know what we are destined to experience. So we seem to have choice. We seem to have a freedom to choose whether to eat this or to eat that. So we should choose to eat Mitta Sattvika Ahara. If it's not our destiny to do so, even if though we choose to do so, we won't be able to do so, but we try as far as possible. Why people eat non-vegetarian food, why people eat meat and fish and things, because they have a liking to do so. The real problem is our likings. So in order to curb the liking, we are recommended to have a sattvic diet. And by having that sattvic diet, that is conducive to having a sattvic state of mind. And that sattvic state of mind will help us when we're trying to turn within. So Bhagavan said of all the niyamas, this is the most, how do you say it in Nana? 9th paragraph, he says, Ella niyamangalilum, surrender, so the best among all the niyamas, Mitta Sattvika Ahara niyama. By the Mitta Sattvika Ahara, which is the best among all the niyamas. Niyamas means all the principles of restraint. Manatin sattva gunam vrittiyaki. So the sattva guna of the mind will increase. Atma-vichara sahayam unda kirdu. And that help will arise for Atma-vichara. That implies that by eating sattvic food, we get a more sattvic state of mind, and that sattvic state of mind will help us in the practice of Atma-vichara.
Could you kindly talk about, in as much detail as possible, as to what neoadvaita is and how Bhagavan's teachings are being distorted and misinterpreted in the name of neoadvaita?
I'm not really qualified to say so because, but I don't, because I really don't know a lot about. But there are people who are presenting Bhagavan's teachings in their own way, distorting them. They're doing the same with Advaita teachings. Obviously, all neo-Advaitin teachers are not exactly the same. They're all different. I mean, everyone is teaching their own particular brand. But a lot of them, for example, say you're already realized, you need not do anything. Making effort is yeah. How does that Punja, he used to say, stop the search or something. I can't remember, something like that. He said, stop the search or something. That type of thing, but you need not do anything, but everything is, it's true, we need not do anything. But what not doing anything means is very, very deep, but they give a very superficial meaning to it. You need not, no practice is necessary, they say. Whereas Bhagavan said practice is absolutely essential. So there's so many ways, but I'm not saying all teach exactly the same thing. Different neo-Advaitin teachers teach different things, but anything that is not, that is distorting, that is, Bhagavan has taught Advaita in its very purest and deepest form. But these neo-Advaitins are distorting it in so many ways, each in their own particular way. So let's not worry. We need not know about neo-Advaita. All we need to know about Advaita as it has been taught by Bhagavan. If we understand that, that's all we need. We need not bother about how others are distorting things. Spiritual teachings have been distorted from time immemorial. It's inevitable because different minds, that is, every mind understands things, interprets things in its own way. So when the mind is purer, we'll come closer to the true meaning of Vedanta. When the mind's less pure, we'll understand it in our own confused way. So we're very the deepest implication of Vedanta is Advaita, and the deepest form of Advaita is what Bhagavan has taught us. So if we stick to Bhagavan's teachings, we need not worry about anything else.
Next question. How to continue with self-inquiry if there are lots of emotions, worries, imaginations in the mind? And second question, how to continue towards self-abidance if I disappear? If the one who questions, who am I, is gone as well? How to continue in such a sort of no-self state to maintain self-awareness and not fall into dreaminess, imagination, memories, etc., which awake from such an empty stage very often? How to maintain self-awareness, Atma-vichara, when subconscious memories get awakened?
Okay, can you say the first question again? Because it's easier for me to answer one at a time, otherwise I forget all that has been said.
Yes. How to continue with self-inquiry if there are lots of emotions, worries, imaginations in the mind?
To whom are all these things? Bhagavan has given us a very simple but very, very powerful clue. To whom? So whatever emotions, whatever grief, whatever imagination, to whom are all these things? To whom do all these things appear? So the key to holding on to self-attentiveness is to not be concerned with whatever may appear, to be concerned only with the one to whom they all appear, namely ourselves. So whatever may appear, whether emotions or whatever they are, to whom do they appear? That doesn't mean just asking the question, to whom does this emotion appear? It means turning our attention back towards ourselves, the one to whom it appears. To the extent to which we turn our attention back towards ourselves, we turn it away from whatever has appeared. So whatever has appeared will then subside. So that's an extremely precious clue Bhagavan has given us. He's given it very in great detail in the 6th paragraph of Nana. He also gives it in a very brief form, in a very compact form, in the 7th verse of Arunachala Aṣṭakam. So we'll be seeing it in due course.
The second question in this is, how to continue towards self-abidance if I disappear? If the one who questions, who am I, is gone as well? How to continue in such a sort of no-self state to maintain self-awareness and not fall into dreaminess, imaginations, memories, etc., which awaken from such an empty stage very often? How to maintain self-awareness, Atma-vichara, when subconscious memories are awakened?
To whom are all these subconscious memories? Again, the same thing. And it's not just a matter of questioning, who am I? We can go on questioning who am I for all eternity. It's not going to get us anywhere. Bhagavan didn't say question who am I. He said investigate who am I. Investigate means we need to turn our attention back towards ourselves to see what we actually are. If we attend to ourselves keenly enough, we as ego will subside, and the state in which ego has subsided is what is called self-abidance, Atmanishta. So the subsidence of ego is essential for Atmanishta, and ego will subside only by attending to itself. That is, it'll subside in such a way that it will remain as it actually is only by attending to itself. So if all these other things that you say appear, these imaginations and memories and emotions and all these things, if these appear, then that means ego hasn't disappeared. Ego is still very much there, because to whom are all these things? They're all only for ego. So instead of concerning ourselves with these things, let us turn our attention back towards this I, to whom all these things appear. If we turn our attention back towards this I means ego, ego will thereby subside, and we will then remain in our real state, which is what is called Atma-vichara, being as we actually are.
Sanjay wanted to ask a question.
So now this sattvic diet in limited quantity, this is Bhagavan's very strong advice, but I am finding it very difficult to follow it. So what's your advice on this? How can I stick to such a diet, sattvic in limited quantities?
Why is it difficult? Because you have desire either to eat more or to eat different type of food. So to whom is that desire? Why do you give in to such desires? So the only way is practice. We all have our own weaknesses. I mean, we all have different types of desires and different types of things. The only way to overcome these is we can't overcome any desire by feeding it. Feeding a desire is like pouring petrol on a fire, as Bhagavan said. So we can overcome desire only by depriving it of any fuel. That's not feeding it. So we need to slowly curb the inclination to eat more than is necessary, or to eat any type of food that is not sattvic.
So have you struggled with your diet at any stage in the earlier years? Of course, now you
not particularly, because we are all troubled by different types of desires. For some people, food is very they have strong desire for certain types of food. I've never really had that sort of type of strong desires. I've had other desires that have troubled me, and still trouble me. So we all have our own weaknesses, and it's only by practice and by Bhagavan's grace that we can overcome these things.
So what exactly, sir, is your diet? If I may ask you.
My diet is fairly simple. Fruits, vegetables, little rice. I mean, it's a simple diet. I don't, because for me, I'm very contented with a very simple diet.
So
I've never really been troubled by desire for this type of food or that type of food. But as I say, there are other desires that trouble me, but we all have to overcome whatever the desires that trouble us.
So do you take more of fruits and vegetables in the raw form? Is it true?
Fruits I take
raw.
Vegetables, mostly cooked vegetables.
But less of spices, I believe. More towards the bland side.
Possibly. I mean, I also use spices, but possibly I don't use chili excessively, certainly. I really don't think much about these things. I just have it. For me, it's a very simple. Food is necessary to sustain the body, but and even to sustain the body, only a limited amount of food is necessary. But for me, I'm not really a person to ask for this, because it's not something that I've had to struggle with.
I've been struggling for this now since decades, I believe.
Yeah.
It's been a big struggle.
we all have our own weaknesses and our own things we have to battle, but ultimately we know anything but desiring anything other than to subside back within is taking us outwards. So we need to try our best to curb our desires, and where we fail, we pray to Bhagavan to help us.
I think, sir, one of the tricks could be not to go near the food which is not.
Yeah, certainly.
Keep it away.
Another important thing to consider, Mita Sattvika Ahara Niyama. Ahara, the root meaning of, though ahara is generally taken to mean food, what ahara actually means is what is taken within. So it's not only what is taken, the food that is taken within the mouth, it's what is taken within, taken in through the five senses. So we need to that Mita Sattvika Ahara Niyama applies not only to food but to anything that we see or hear or touch or taste or smell. So we need to avoid those things that draw our mind outwards. So if seeing all sorts of tasty food is disturbing your mind, better to try to avoid seeing such things.
Keep away from that area where that food is kept. Keep away from the area where it is kept.
Yeah.
That could be one of the ways.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Would it be fair to say that the purpose of life or the purpose of being given this body is to do Atma-vichara? If that is so, why do we have elaborate rituals both at home and in temples, etc., especially these days where there is more pomp and, for example, think of Ganesh Chaturthi, then it is about having these huge idols or eating modaks. The inner meaning is mostly lost. How would practicing this way lead us to Atma-vichara?
A lot of religious activity, that is, we can go to temples, we can go to churches or mosques or synagogues or whatever may be, for one of two reasons. We can go either for the love of God or for the love of what we think we can get from God. Most people who go to temples or perform all these rituals and things, they're doing it for the sake of what they think they can get from God. They think if they do all these things, they'll have good life. And so that is called kamya upasana. They're worshipping for the fulfillment of their desires. So their love is not really love for God, it's love for what they can get from God. So we need, if we are following this spiritual path, if our aim is only to annihilate this ego, even if we go to a temple or go to a church or a mosque or whatever, we won't be going praying for the fulfillment of our desires. We'll be praying for freedom from desires, the freedom from the one who has desires. So it's not the rituals are neither. The rituals are just actions. It's not the actions that matter. It's the motive with which those actions are done. As Bhagavan says in Upadeshundya, action cannot give liberation. But if the action is done nishkamya, that is without desire for any fruit, for any personal benefit, but just for the love of God, then that will purify the mind and show the way to liberation. So don't be concerned about what others are doing. Yes, many people who go to temples go with all sorts of motives. Many people who celebrate great festivals, they do so with all sorts of motives. Some people do it with it's a way of of earning money. There's so many things, but that's not our concern. Why are we going to the temple? Why are we going to the church or the mosque or whatever? That's what we need to consider. And if going to temples and so on doesn't appeal to you, fine, then just leave it. Ultimately, what we have to do, as Bhagavan says in the final verse of Arunachala Aṣṭakam, Varu Salla Kadan. That is it. We have to go back the way we came. Going back the way we came means we have to go back within. So let's not see what others are doing. It's not. Our salvation does not depend upon others. Our salvation depends upon our own love to go within. So let us try to go within and not worry about all these external things. They're neither good nor bad in themselves. It depends on the motive with which they're done.
The next question. I asked this question last week, but I didn't feel it was fully answered. What would music sound like if it was sung from silence? And would there be any difference to prose in its impact? You mentioned there have been bhakti songs which have been written, but I was more concerned with the musical expression of a Jnani, the voice, the melody, etc. How would it be different to a modern-day kirtan singer? Would we tell if it's Krishna playing the flute versus any other flute player? Michael, before I answer, was just there is a recording of Sadhu Om singing.
Yes, yes.
And of course, there are other Jnanis
Yeah.
one can listen to,
Yeah.
and who are still alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't really know what answer I can give to that. These are yeah, I mean, there have been many great saints who great jnanis who have been Sadhu Om is one who have expressed their devotion through classical music. Tyagaraja and so many great saints are there. So yeah, I don't know what to say. It is this is not really I don't know how you that is when someone is singing. We see a lot of people who sing. There are so many people who sing devotional songs and put them on YouTube, for example, and you see them all this sort of thing. It's we don't know really how much. If it's really love from the heart, they won't be doing these things for YouTube. But they outwardly they act as if they have so much devotion. But who are we to judge what the devotion of others? So, but if it really comes from silence, it will touch our heart in a different way. But that we each have to experience for ourselves. It's not something that can be quantified or described or put in words.
This is, I think, the last question, Michael. Yes, it's about a Tamil festival. On a particular day in a particular Tamil month, in all the Shiv temples all over Tamil Nadu, Shiva Lingam are decorated with cooked rice. What's the significance of this ritual?
Again, well, offering food to God, that is the idea in temple worship. I'm not answering this specific question, I'm giving a more general answer. The idea in temple worship, if supposing Bhagavan were to come to your house, how would you welcome him? You'll welcome him with all honor. You'll give him water to have a bath, give him nice clean clothes, offer him nice food. This is what they're doing in temple. They consider that this linga or the murti is God himself. And so as they would honor a much respected guest of their house, they are treating that murti. They give abhishekam, they put nice fresh clothes, and they put nice garlands and everything, and they offer food. This is all, this is all just a way of expressing the love for that murti. This particular ritual of putting rice on the annam, putting cooked rice on the linga, the particular significance of that I don't know, but it's all part of the same general idea. We are offering food to God. And what we then take what has been offered, we take it as prasadam.
Oh, I have a question, Michael.
Yes.
Even though if one does realize the self, isn't it wise to remember that bhakti is the mother of Jnana Yoga?
If we've realized the self, there's no one left to remember anything. But while we're on the path, yes, bhakti is the key. Bhakti means love. Without love, how can we know ourselves as we actually are? So Bhagavan always emphasized bhakti is the mother of jnana. Bhakti is the key. Because in order to attain jnana, we need to surrender ourselves completely. How will we be willing to surrender ourselves unless we have all-consuming love? So love is absolutely essential on this path. That is, when we try to turn our attention inwards, why our attention keeps on coming outwards? Because of our desire and attachment for things other than ourselves. So unless we have great love, we will not be able to go deep in this practice of self-investigation.
And that great love, would you say that is a result of grace?
Of course, because the love cannot come from ego, because the nature of ego, as Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Ulunaptu, Urupatri undam, Urupatri nikam, Urupatri undumake omgam. Grasping form, it comes into being, grasping form, it stands, grasping upon and feeding upon forms, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. So the very nature of ego is grasping form. Form means anything other than itself, because ego is formless. So grasping form means the attention going outwards and constantly dwelling on things other than ourselves. So since the nature of ego is such, but love to turn within cannot come from ego. It can only come from our real nature, which is grace. So it's only by grace that we get the love to go within. That grace is ever present in our heart, but and that grace is always pulling us within. Bhagavan's constantly talking about this inward pull of grace, but we will experience that inward pull only to the extent to which we subside. So we need to make the effort to turn within. Then the more we turn within, the more we will feel that inward pull of grace. But even our effort to turn within, that is also a result of grace. The very interest we have. Why we're talking about this subject? Because we're interested. We may not be very good at turning within, but at least we're interested. We'd like to go within, at least at some level of our mind, we have this liking to go within. So we're interested in these things. Even this interest is given only by grace. So we are all of us who are gathered here today, we're all here, but it's only by grace that we're here.
Yes, definitely a blessing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, I think that's the end of the questions
Right.
for today.
Okay.
Should we close now?
Yes, certainly.
We can do the Bhagavan's mantra together, everyone. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Ramanaya.